All right. Well, good day, everyone, and welcome to today's session of A Course in Miracles Workbook Lesson 186. My name is Oliver Blue, and I am your temporary host, your guide, your coach for this workbook lesson. And we're excited about what we have learned since our last review. They just seem to go deeper, broader, wider, and become more evident to us that we are on the right track. We're in the right place, and we're at the right time. We are in eternity's time, and we are in a place where we are being transformed by the renewing of our minds, and that we're proving what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of our Father is. And that's what makes us aware of our constant happiness, joy, and peace, is the knowing of the will of our Creator, is the knowing of ourself and of our brothers. And the purpose for everything is becoming more clear and more absolute clarity is being brought into our awareness. And I'm so happy about that. So with that said, we're going to jump right into today's idea. Again, we're on Workbook Lesson 186. And the idea for today, the thought for today, is salvation. Salvation of the world depends on me. Salvation of the world, it depends on me. Now, that is a huge statement, and it sounds like a huge responsibility that this statement is making about us. And so allow me to go back and remind us what the Course means when it talks about salvation. So let me see if I can't find that here. What is salvation? If salvation depends on me, I need to know what it is from the Course's perspective. So we're going to go back a few lessons. Well, here we go. It says, what is salvation? This is on page 407 in the same workbook lesson section. Page 407. What is salvation? Salvation is a promise made by God. Notice now, salvation, according to the Course in Miracles, is a promise made by God that you would find your way to Him at last. Notice now, salvation is a promise that is made by God. So salvation is based on God's promise. Notice now. But then our lesson is referring to our part in that by saying that salvation of the world, it says, the salvation of the world. Let me find it. Depends on me. But here it says that salvation is a promise made by God that I would find my way to Him at last. So, when we talk about salvation from the Course's perspective, it has to do with God's promise about your return. When we talk about salvation from your perspective, it says that salvation depends on you, meaning that salvation is your return to God. But then God promises that you will return. So it appears from these two ideas that no one can escape salvation. No one could ultimately successfully remain in their mind apart from their Creator. That salvation is guaranteed by God. And that when God guarantees that something is, then it is. Because, when God could, like Scripture says, when God could swear by no greater, he couldn't find anything greater to himself to guarantee that this will happen. He swore by his very own self. This is a verse of Scripture we see over in Hebrews, that God is so absolutely sure about your salvation. He says that it is guaranteed by his very own self. It's like, when you go to a financial institution and you guarantee, when you guarantee that a certain amount of money is going to be repaid, that means that what? That means that ultimately you're responsible for that payment, even though it may be a contract with someone else, but you are ultimately responsible to make it happen. That means you guarantee it. I mean, it's going to happen. And so God is saying here that even if we fail, even if we fail in our obligation, he said he still guaranteed what? Your salvation. That's what he says here. He says, salvation is a promise made by God that you would find your way to him at last. And this guarantee or this promise is to everyone. No one is excluded. So if you look down through all the history of the world, with every expression, with every activity and event, as bad as it might seem, as successful as it might seem, that it escapes salvation, God's here said that he promised that you will find your way home. Because really, in reality, this is what God is saying. There's really only one, and that's himself. So he's betting on himself. That is a part of what we all share. God is betting on his very own self when he's betting on you, when he's promising you, when he's guaranteed you, because he realized that you are not something separate from him or her or it, but that you are the very same self that God is. And so God knows that he is the changeless one. God knows that he is the unalterable one. That ultimately, when time and space have passed away, when all the illusions have run their course, the only thing that's going to be standing is that which is always is. Only thing that's going to be standing is that which is real. And that is what? That is love. That is God. When time has finally run its course, when all of the shenanigans are finally over, when all the movies and all the actors and all the content has come to its end, God said he guaranteed that what he is and what he has created will remain as it always was. How confident can you be? And so when we grab a hold of the confidence that God has in us, Notice now, not our own confidence. We grab a hold to the confidence that was birthed in us, not the confidence that we made, not the confidence that we conjure up, but the confidence that was placed in our creation. We can walk in the certainty. We can walk in the absolute surety of the promise of God, that nothing can separate us from the love. That's why that bold statement is made in the book of Romans in the Bible by Paul when he says absolutely nothing. He says absolutely nothing can separate us from the love of God. It's impossible for that to happen. Why? Because it's guaranteed. It's promised. It's a promise of God. It's a guarantee by God. And so it says, this promise cannot be but kept. It guarantees that time will have an end. Notice now, this is what it's saying about salvation. That is a promise, and this promise cannot be but kept. Why? It says, because it is guaranteed. It guarantees that time will have an end. Time as we know it will have an end. That's why they call it time. Space and form as we know it, including your body and all the things that you can see in the natural, will have an end. These are not eternal things. These are temporary form, temporary time. It's only temporary, like a passing cloud. It comes and it goes. You cannot bet your life on it. You cannot put anything on it because it changes every second. He said it guarantees that time will have an end. And all the thoughts that have been born in time will end as well. Every thought that we've had in time, that it's not a timeless or a formless thought, it has an end. It says God's word is given every mind which thinks that it has separate thoughts. Every mind that has come to this world of time and form. It says every thought that have been born. It says, and every thought of separation. It says will be replaced with the thoughts of peace, will be replaced with the thought of truth, will be replaced with the thought of reality. And that is true now in eternity, as it always has been. And so it says the thought of peace was given to God's Son the instant that his mind had thought of war. There was no need for such a thought before, for peace was given without opposite, and merely was. But when the mind is split or seemingly split, there is a need for healing. So back in eternity past, before the world was, when the tiny mad idea appeared to split the mind in two, from one to two, it says, in that instant was the thought of peace given. The moment that the thought of war or separation entered into the mind of God's creation. He said, so the thought that has the power to heal the split mind became a part of every fragment of the mind that still was one. That means that what? The idea of our oneness has never left its source. It's never left us. It says, but fail to recognize its oneness. So our experience of being here in a body, in a world of time and space, in form, is but a temporary experience of being prodigal from the reality of oneness. It's a temporary experience. It's not reality. It's not real, but it's a temporary experience of what would it be like to be separate from God, or what would it be like to have lost oneness, or what would it be like for the changeless to change. That doesn't even sound right. And so our experience in these bodies, in this world, this incarnation that we are seen to be having, and many of them, many lifetimes, are being changed to the purpose of God, to wake up all humanity to the reality of their what? Of their original state of being, of oneness. So salvation is that promise that would happen to every thought that thought differently, that every expression that expressed differently, that everyone that come into the world with a seeming individual self that is apart from God and apart from each other. He said every one of those thoughts will be healed with one thought. And it says, now it did not know itself and thought its own identity was lost. We thought we had lost ourselves. It says salvation is undoing in the sense that it does nothing. Failing to support the world of dreams and malice. Thus it lets illusions go. By not supporting them, it merely lets them quietly go down to dust. The whole idea of separation. The whole idea of a loss of oneness or loss of love. The whole idea of being separate from God. He says these ideas, he says, they fail in their attempt to be real. He said, and thus they become unsupported by reality and return to the dust or the nothingness that they are. And what they hid is now revealed. What was, like Paul said in Ephesians 1, he said, what appears in time past that was hid, but has now been made what? Revealed to the saints, or revealed to humanity. What? Christ in you, or Christ as you, or oneness, basically, the hope of glory. He said it was held in time past, but now been revealed to us through revelation. An altar to the holy name of God, whereon his word is written, or his promise is written, with the gift of your forgiveness laid before it, and the memory of God not far behind. It says, from here we give salvation to the world, for it is here salvation was received. The song of our rejoicing is the call to all the world that freedom is returned. That time is almost over, and God's Son has but an instant more to wait until his Father is remembered. Dreams are done. Eternity has shined away the world, and only heaven now exists at all. So here it basically confirms that nothing ever really changed, that we always and will always remain as a shared part of God, in the very heart of God. Here in this lesson today, it will talk about that we are the holy home of God. We remain the holy home of God. And so, let's get into the lesson. Salvation of the world depends on me. Even though it's a promise of God. Here is the statement that will one day take all arrogance away from every mind. Here is the thought of true humility, which holds no function as your own, but that which has been given you. It offers you acceptance of a part assigned to you without insisting on another role. It does not judge your proper role. It but acknowledges the will of God is done on earth as well as in heaven. It unites all wills on earth in heaven's plan to save the world, restoring it to heaven's peace. And I said a whole lot right there. But to sum up what it said, is to say that only the truth shall prevail in the end. And only real humility is when we embrace and accept the truth as it is, as startling as it might be, as amazing as it may sound. Salvation of the world depends on me. That's a startling statement. That's an amazing statement. It said, but it is but an acknowledgement that the will of God is done on earth as it is in heaven. Remember, that was the prayer of Jesus. Let it be on earth as it is in heaven. That's the will of God. And how is it in heaven? In heaven is only oneness. The Father and the Son are one and the same. That is a thought. That's a reality. That's an idea. It's a God idea. And that idea is what eternity is. It's what shall prevail over the dream of separation. So how arrogant it may sound when we say, God depends on me for salvation of the world. It is a statement of truth. It's a statement of truth. It says, let us not fight our function, because this is the role and the function that we've been given. He said, let's not fight it. Let's not fight the reality of who you are. You are who you are. You are God's prized creation. You are God's representation. You appear here in the person of God. He said, don't fight the function, or don't fight the feeling, or don't fight the reality. That is who you are. And we have gone on this prodigal journey, trying to make of ourselves something else and give ourselves roles and functions that are not ours. Like to prove that separation is real, that love has lost its power, that humanity succeeded in separating from God or anything, that there's not just the perfect oneness, that we are not just the perfect creation. We've gone out to prove that that's not true in so many ways. You can't even count. It says, we did not establish our function. God did. We did not establish our role. God did. We did not create ourselves. God did. It is not our idea. The idea that salvation of the world depends on us. That's not a man-made idea. That's a God idea. The idea, like Jesus said, that when you see me, you've seen the Father. That's not man's idea. That's a God idea. The reality of our oneness with God, that we share the same being, the same essence. We share the same life. We are of the one self. That's not a man-made idea. That's a God idea. That's not even a religious idea. Because religion, as we know it and as we have recorded its history, it's not a God idea. Jesus never intended to form a religion out of his message in his life, but we did it. It's not a God idea. Jesus came to reconcile the world to himself. to let the world know who the world is, who we are, to give up our false identity and embrace the oneness. And you didn't, and so that's not a religious idea. That is the truth. The means are given us by which our function will be perfectly accomplished. God gave us not only the function, but the means to accomplish it. What is the means by which he gave us to accomplish it? He placed it within us. It is who we are. It's in our identity. That is the means. That's why the number one goal in these workbook lessons, the number one goal in the plan of God's salvation, in God's plan for salvation, is for you to wake up to your true identity. It's not about church. It's not about synagogues. It's not about mosques. It's not about any of this stuff that we get involved with that seem to even further separate and divide us. It's not about any of that. It is simply about your awakening. You're coming to embrace the truth of your oneness with your Father. That's what it's all about. That's what life is all about. Your reconciliation. All that we are asked to do is to accept our part in genuine humility. That's all. That is it. That is all that is required. That is all that is asked, is our acceptance of what is. It has nothing else to do with anything else. None of our rituals, none of the processes and plans and organizations that we put in place to say this is what is required, this is what it takes. Doesn't take anything but your acceptance of what already is. That you are what you are. That's all. It's that simple. It's not complicated. The will of God is not complicated. It is so simple that we miss it in creating what? Our own ways, our own plans, making our own requirements. All that we are asked to do is to accept our part in genuine humility and not deny with self-deceiving arrogance that we are worthy. And see, that is really what is at the root of us creating a different way or different will than God's, is that we don't feel worthy. Notice now, it says we don't feel worthy. Well, what do our feelings have to do with the truth? So it's a worthy, or it is a question of worthiness. So it becomes a question of guilt. That guilt still remains in the mind of humanity. And it's unsubstantiated. There's no need to be guilty because nothing has happened in reality. And when we embrace that, when we come to understand that nothing really happened, there's never been a separation. That who I am, I've always been who I am by God's creation. I've been the loving, timeless, eternal being that God created and has never changed. Yes. And all I need, all is required for me is to accept that. And that is what true humility is it just accept what is. And so it is. And so I accept what is my true identity. It says, what is given us to do? We have the strength to do it. We have the world, we have the means by which to do it. God gave us a role and a function, and we have the means by which to do it. Our minds are suited perfectly. Notice, look what God said about us. Our minds are suited perfectly to take the part assigned to us by the one who knows us well. What mind is he talking about? The mind of Christ. Again, that which needs to be accepted. And what needs to be let go, or what needs to be undone, is that which we made, the dream of separation. And then to embrace and accept the mind of Christ. That is what? That is the wherewithal. That is the means by which we're able to fulfill our function. Where there is no guilt, there is no unworthiness, there is no sin consciousness. The Course goes on to say, well, there is no world. In other words, there is no illusions. There is no falsity, because it really doesn't exist. It's like the dust that bloweth in the wind. So today's idea that salvation of the world depends on me. So this idea that the salvation of the world depends on me seem quite sobering. And it does, to the separated mind. What do you mean depend on me? See, when you have a self-concept or a self-image of yourself that is not in alignment with your true identity, then we would question such a sobering statement. But when you come to embrace the reality of your true self as one with your Father, as whole and complete and innocent and free and eternal and formless and timeless, without birth, without death, that is everywhere present, that is love only, filled with the beauty and the radiant aliveness of its source, which is God. When we carry that reality in our thinking, when we raise our thinking to the level of our true self, then the statement is just what it is. It is what it is, the truth. We just say, yes, Father. we say, I come to do thy will, oh Father, like Jesus did. It's not a big deal to be the savior of the world. We are saviors of this world. It's our acceptance of the truth that saves the entire world. So when you embrace the recognition of who you are and your oneness with God, your embracing of that, your recognition of that, and your acceptance of that, it saves the entire world. Just your acceptance of it saves the entire world, because there's only one of us. There's only one of you. And you are what everyone else is, even God. There's no separation, remember? It's only the one thing. So when the one thing wakes up, everything wakes up. The whole world wakes up when you do. That's why the salvation of the world depends on you. And then God says, what? I guarantee, I promise that you're going to wake up. And he has complete confidence in that. Now this is making a little more of what? Oh, I see. It is true. It's not an arrogant statement. It's only arrogant for me to deny this reality. I'm really being God humble when I say yes to this idea that I am what this. You are the savior of the world. You are the light of the world. That's what he meant. He says, so today's ideas seem quite sobering until you see its meaning. All it says is that your Father still remembers you. That's all it says. That your Father still remembers what he created. He created himself and he called him you. He says, and offers you the perfect trust He holds in you who are his creation. God completely trusts, without a doubt, in you, in your reality. He has all the confidence that there is in your creation. There's never been a doubt about your value. There's never been a doubt about your worth. There's never been a doubt about your oneness with God from his perspective. So the doubt and the uncertainty and the unsurety and the anxiety and the fear and the anguish that we have experienced in this lifetime, in the many lifetimes, that is not what's real. That is what's unreal. That's what hell feels like. That is what hell experience is. To have any sensation or feeling of separation from your creator or from each other. That's really what hell is. But today is the day that our salvation, which is guaranteed and promised by God, which the whole world depends on, we stand up in it with confidence and assurance that we are the holy home, the holy creation of a loving Father. It says, this idea, it does not ask that we be different in any way from what we are. God is not asking us to be different from what we are. We can be free. We are free to be what we are. It is imprisoning to attempt to be something else other than what you are. The creation of God, the holiness of God, the innocence of God, the radiant beauty and aliveness of God. That is what's so painful, when we attempt to be something else, not loving, not joined with each other in unity in the one will of God. No wonder the world is in the chaos that it's in. Now you see why. And we have created this mess. But God said, regardless of the mess that we have created, when all the dust settles, when all time has run its course and all form has shown its limited self, what remained is what was what? What remained is that which I created from the beginning, which is likened to myself, which is myself. That's the confidence that we can have in this. Like you say, this is the boldness that we can have. This is the confidence that we can have in reality, that nothing will outlast, nothing will transcend the truth. What could humility request but this? That it be no other way than what God created. That's what true humility is. That is not any other way than what God created. So once we know what God created and embrace it and accept it, it's not going to be any other way, regardless of what the conditions or what the situation or circumstances that may show up in the world as contrary to that. It doesn't matter. We learn to look past that, because that's not the real McCoy. And what could arrogance deny but this? That is another way. Today we will not shrink from our assignment on the spacious grounds that modesty is outraged. Modesty is outraged when we stand up to the truth. It is pride that would deny the call for God Himself. God is calling us to our original habitat. God is calling us back to our original nature. God is calling us back to our true identity as one with Him. All false humility we lay aside today, that we may listen to God's voice revealed to us that He would have us do, of what He would have us do. We do not doubt our adequacy for the function He will offer us. We are more than adequate to fulfill the function and the role that God has given us. We will be certain, notice now, we will be certain only that God knows our strengths. Not our own strength, but the strength of Christ that we are. Our wisdom, not our own wisdom, but the wisdom of God that we are. Our holiness, not our own attempt to make ourselves right, but the whole and complete reality that God created in us. And if our Father deem us worthy, so we are. If God has made you worthy, so are you. Jesus said it, as He is, so are we in this world. And how is He? How is Jesus? He's been seated far above everything. So are we in this world. We're above everything in time and space. We're above everything in this world that we have made. It is but arrogance that judges otherwise. So there is one way, and only one, to be released from the imprisonment that our plan to prove the false is true has brought to us. Accept the plan you did not make instead. Judge not your value to it. If God's voice assures you that salvation needs your part and that the whole depends on you, be sure it is so. Salvation of the world depends on us. The arrogant must cling to words, afraid to go beyond them, to experience what might affront their stance. Yet are the humble free to hear the voice which tells them what they are and what to do. That is the voice that speaks inside of all of us, urging us, calling us back to the awareness of our place of splendor and greatness, part of the whole. Arrogance make an image of yourself that is not real. It is this image which quails and retreats in terror as the voice for God assures you that you have the strength, the wisdom, and the holiness to go beyond all images. You are not weak, as is the image of yourself. You are not ignorant and helpless. Sin cannot tarnish the truth in you. And misery can come not near the holy home of God. See here, I told you, it's going to tell you that. You are the holy home of God. And it says what? It says, misery cannot come near your true reality. So if there's any experience of misery, it's because we are holding an image of ourselves that is not true. If there's any pain and anguish, we're holding an image of ourselves, which is not true. If there's any sickness and disease, it's because we're holding an image of ourselves that's not true. If we see ourselves unworthy or feel a sense of separation, it's because we are holding an image of ourselves that is not true. The world is in the shape that it's in the mess that it's in the crisis that it's in the chaos that it's in, because it's holding an image of itself that is not true. And we one by one wake up and release ourselves from that self-concept, from that self-image that is not true. And as we do that, we become the light of the world. We become the saviors of the world. The salvation of the world now depends on us. To fulfill our role and function as the light of the world. To be the example, to be the substance and the evidence of what reality is. That's what our life becomes. That's what your life has become. So, now that we know what we are, who we are, why we are, what our function and role is, and that we have the power and the wherewithal to do it. We have the guarantee by God and the promise by God that it is done. That we are in the perfect will of God. Now that we know that, do as God's voice directs. So as we go through our day, we allow the word of truth, the voice for truth, to speak to us and to guide and direct us. And if it takes a thing of you, and if it acts a thing of you, if you feel inspired by the voice that speaks for God that's within you, it said, if it acts a thing of you, which seems impossible, remember who it is that acts, and who would make denial. Then consider this, which is more likely to be right. The voice that speaks for the creator of all things, who knows all things exactly as they are, or a distorted image of yourself, confused, bewild, inconsistent, and unsure of everything. Let not its voice direct you. So we don't move in uncertainty. We don't move in inconsistency or confusion or bewilderment, but we move in confidence, in certainty that which is inspiring us to love, inspiring us to work miracles of love. We move with confidence. Let us not voice direct. Let not the voice that is confused direct you. We don't move on confusion. We move on certainty. Hear instead a certain voice. See, a certain voice, which tells you of a function given you by your Creator, who remembers you and urges that you now remember Him. His gentle voice is calling from the known to the unknowing. He would comfort you, although He knows no sorrow. He would make a restitution, though He is complete, a gift to you, although He knows that you have everything already. He has thoughts which answer every need His Son perceives, although He sees them not. For love must give, and what is given in His name takes on the form most useful in a world of form. So what He's saying here is what? God's got our back. Whatever we are asked to do, God gives us the wherewithal, the resources, and everything that we need to get it done. God is the giver. God makes the request, and He gives the wherewithal to do it. God is our source. These are the forms which never can deceive, because they come from the formlessness itself. So from formlessness, from our reality, whatever we need in form, it comes to us. Forgiveness is an earthly form of love. Notice now, forgiveness doesn't exist in heaven because there's nothing to forgive in heaven. But it comes in form because it's youthful in form, because it is through the function of forgiveness that we let the world go free. It is the function of forgiveness that you let yourself go free. It is through the function of forgiveness, which is the greatest gift in time and space, that is used within the plan of salvation, that we save the world from all of its illusion of separation. We forgive the entire world. It says, forgiveness is the earthly form of love, which, as it is in heaven, has no form. Yet what is needed here is given here as it is needed. Forgiveness is needed, and it's forgiven, and it is given. In this form, you can fulfill your function even here. So the one thing that we need is already given in the form of forgiveness. And that's what it takes in earth and in time and space to wake up. We forgive ourselves for dreaming the dream of separation. We forgive the dream and the dreamer. We let go of it all. In this form, you can fulfill your function even here, although what love will mean to you when formlessness has been restored to you is greater still. Salvation of the world depends on you who can forgive. Such is your and my function here. So yes, we are the saviors of the world, and salvation depends on us. And now we understand why. And that's such a what? That's such a relief to know that what the will of God is our will too. There's only the one will. There's only the one life. There's only the one self. There's only the one God, our Father, and the Son. And we're all one. Thank you so much. This is the end of Workbook Lesson 186. Salvation of the world depends on us, and it's guaranteed by God. Thank you so much. We'll see you on tomorrow. Peace.